You know what it is. That's right. It's time to talk money with your money nerd and financial coach. Now, tighten those purse strings and open those ears. It's the Money Talk with Tiff podcast.
Hey everyone, I am so excited because I have Anthony on the line from About That Wallet, and I am so happy to have him on because we met at FinCon and he is now one of my podcast buddies. He has his own podcast that is doing great things, but what he's here to talk to us about today is understanding habits and why you should recognize, use, and create your own habits. So, hey Anthony, how are you today?
I am doing well. Good to be on the show.
Thank you. Thank you. So let's hop right in. You know, with my podcast, I like to be short, sweet, to the point. So let's start off with understanding your habits. So what is a habit and how, what does that even mean?
Well, let's think about it. Everything that we do day to day are built up because of little habits that we have in the morning. We have our little routines, as you will call them. We have to first understand that the things that get us going in the morning. So, you know, somebody might write down everything that they want to do the night before, but that's their routine because it helps them get them going. So now let's talk about, so now that we have like a little routine, we can start talking about, all right, is this really a habit or is it a routine? Because the habits are something that we start to do that start off as routines, but then they become something more ingrained in us that we kind of like, we don't feel together. It's more of like a feeling type deal. And understanding those feelings is that first you have to understand what is that cue that realizes that you see like that notification that you get on your phone, right? That's a cue. That is like a clicker. All right. Now your routine is to go grab your phone. Now you grab your phone. And then you recognize, you see what it is, and that's your reward. And then it's a constant loop like that all the time. Because if you set up certain ringtones for certain people you really enjoy having conversations with, that ringtone will be more joyous and so forth. So that's your cue. And then your routine is obviously to pick up the phone and so on. But when it's somebody that you don't like, there's also another cue. You might give them like the Darth Vader theme or something like that. Like, I don't want to talk to you. But that's your part of your habits because you hear the cue and then you realize like, my routine now is to not answer it. So my reward is that I get to keep my own sanity. And that's one of the things that we have to first recognize. What are our cues? And then what are our routines around them? And what is the reward that we're actually looking to receive? Now, understanding that, now we can start doing almost like routine hacking. Because right now, all of our habits, if you combine them together, create us our own idiosyncrasies. And because we have our own idiosyncrasies, which are made up of a bunch of habits, that defines on who you are. Because like how with your dreads, you don't just keep your dreads just as is. Your cue is like, oh, they're getting a little frizzle. Now your routine is to go start cleaning them up right quick so that you can have the reward of feeling good. You know, and that's one of the things that we have to kind of understand what they are. Now, if our routine or our reward is one thing, can we change our routines? And this is where we start to realize like, hey, we can actually change them. We can ignore our habits, or we can just kind of just let them be. And understanding what our reward is helps us to either determine on how we want to navigate the world today.
Gotcha. So if I understand correctly, you're saying we have to recognize what our cues are. And then once we recognize what our cues are, understand like what habit we have that is attached to that cue already, or what routine we have that's attached to that cue. And if we like it, then cool. But if we don't like it, then we need to change it. So I think what I want to get into a little deeper is, how do you even recognize these cues? Like, is it that, like, let's say, for instance, someone's listening, they're like, okay, recognize the cue. Now that they have that awareness that they're looking for cues. Is that how this process gets started, or how did you get started on this process?
I got started on this process by just growing up, because it's, I guess you could say, one of those financial traumas that listening to Rakim a lot, Rakim Sabri, talk about financial trauma got me to realize that this is something that I've been doing already, which was recognizing that my mom was doing something with money that that I saw that she was doing, and I was growing up to actually mimic her process. So one of the cues was when you get paid to take because back then we got physical checks, and she was like, always just go to the store and go get it cash at the check cashing place, and then you get your money. It wasn't one of those where they just say, just put it in the bank. But the cue was, hey, I got my paycheck. My routine is to go to these cash checking places. And then my reward was my cash. And so now that I'm older and I recognize that, but I'm sorry, the way how I started changing that was that I started listening to other people. Or I guess they say, you listen to a drummer, everybody's jamming, but you hear another drum on the other side. It was like, this sounds pretty a little different. Let me go explore that. And that's what happened. And that's what got me onto the journey now to start to teach people about their financial habits.
Gotcha. So yeah, I completely agree with that. Because I mean, you don't know what you don't know. So if your example was, oh, I have to go to this check cashing place and this is what I have to do when I get my paycheck, then of course you would fall into that same thing unless you were exposed to a different way to do it. So like, for instance, maybe you get a job and they're like, oh, fill out this direct deposit form. You like, wait a minute, what's direct deposit? I thought I'd just go to the check cashing place, And so now the job has exposed you to a new way of doing things. And then, maybe you go to the bank and you ask them, well, how does this work? How do I get my check? And now you start educating yourself about this different way to do it. And you're like, well, this might be a better option, and I can see that with pretty much everything in life, like, and I feel like that's why it's important that we have these conversations, like conversations about what works for one person, what doesn't work, and all of these things, and being more open about that information because it could help someone, You don't know what other people know. And so at the end of the day, the more we talk, the more we can learn. So anyway, that was kind of like a digression. Let's get back to habits.
No, you're right on.
So, so let's say somebody, they're like, okay, I recognize the cues. I have this habit that I don't really care for. So like, let's say for instance, and I'm just using a general one that most people are like, oh, I want to get rid of this, which is smoking. Okay. So let's say the cue is I wake up in the morning and I'm used to just having a cigarette because that's just part of my habit. Now, if someone's dealing with something like that, now cigarettes might be a little different because they're addicting too. But if somebody has a habit like that and they want to change it, what are some ways that they can start making that change? Like, is it change your cue? Is it change your routine around the cue? Like, how does that work?
Well, let's take the end result, which is your feeling. So we could take cigarettes for an example, right? And the way how the cigarette companies, this is great. I love how they do that stuff. So that, that whole truth thing about the cigarettes and everything like that, they actually own the company Truth to talk about them. So in other words, to get them back on the board. So they're getting money on both sides. It's hilarious. But they helping you understand like, hey, nicotine is addictive, right? And everybody's looking for that reward. But the cues could be pretty much the same, but that's where that routine comes in. And that routine is either do you smoke or do you use the patch to get the same feeling? And that's what they want you to get to. So that one is actually an easy one. That's because it's already out there. It's a lot easier. But we can even take it even something simpler, which is like brushing your teeth. They tell you that gritty feeling that you feel in your teeth. Like that's how all the commercials work, right? You start thinking, oh man, well, my teeth feel gritty. What is your routine? You go use this toothpaste. Don't matter what it is. And then you feel the reward of clean. Now, other toothpaste was like, well, you can feel clean, but what about your breath? So now we got mint. So now you got minty toothpaste. And then other people was like, well, you might have good breath, you might have good mint, but is it good for the environment? And then it was like, try this charcoal toothpaste. Like, it's so many toothpaste out there, but it gets you to start thinking about how these commercials and marketing is using the same processes that we understand these habits into. Pretty much you're going to hack your life when you understand what your cues are, what your routines are, and what the reward that you're actually searching for. But to take it to a global session is that think about how we have to always eat. We feel hungry. That's our cue. Our routine is to go search and find something to eat. It might be fast food, might be to the grocery store, might be whatever. But the end result is that we feel full. Now, from a global perspective, who's to say that we actually have to consume food to curb our hunger? Say if we had a patch that could actually feed all of our nutrients and everything like that, we don't have to worry about consuming anymore. So then we can get all our nutrients and so forth. So, but to speak that into existence, that there is actually somebody working on this, a bunch of scientists are working on that right now to kind of figure out a way to make this come to fruition. So this gets you to almost now you're life hacking at this point. But these are just different things to kind of think about once you understand what your cues are, what your routines are, and your rewards. Such a powerful, powerful concept.
Yeah, and I want to get back to that, but you just made me laugh a little bit because just the visual, like, all right, I'm hungry. Let me throw this patch on. I was just like, it's a cool idea because, I'm thinking about, like you said, globally, if there's people that experience hunger and stuff, just having a patch, being able to get all the nutrients they need versus, if they didn't have access to food, or the nutritious food and not even in other countries, even here in the US. So I could see how that could be helpful, but it was just the visual where, my mind always goes to jokes. But anyway, back to the habits thing. So what I'm getting is figure out your cue and then figure out the reward that you're trying to get to. And then you can kind of change your routine, AKA your habits in the middle, because you can still get to the same reward and you know what triggers it. And now you can just change what's in the middle. Is that correct?
That is correct. But also you can change your cues. As well. Like the beauty of it, once you recognize it, and this goes back to the three things of habits. It's like you can recognize them, then you can either use them. So like say like you have an awesome habit of like being consistent on your podcast all the time. I don't have that. I'm working to get there, but I'm watching what are your cues are. I'm trying to figure out, okay, what are your cues to kind of get you going? And then what is your ultimate reward that you like about it? And obviously your routine is to be consistent. So I can see your routine, but I'm trying to figure out what is your reward and what are your cues. Once I understand that, then I got your full habit. And I was like, cool, I think I can either copy that one, which is using your habit, and then I can either change it to fit my needs. I was like, okay, I can still get that same, I can stay consistent. My reward is a little different and my cues are a little different, but yet I can still keep that same pace. And so, you can pick and choose, because a lot of people like the reward, like they see all this money on the music videos, how to get these big houses or whatever. They see the reward, but they don't see the routine, that grind that gets them there. They don't see what are the cues, like what are things that gets them up every day. And so like it's always a missing piece when you don't sit down with a person and actually ask them, what are your processes? And when it comes to finances, and as you know, as a financial coach, is that you have to understand where the person is at and how do they get there. And now let's take them up to that next level.
Yes, completely agree. I will say for the podcasting example, my cue is my calendar. So if it doesn't pop up on my calendar, I would not be recording. So I want to say that's probably my cue is, okay, let me look at my calendar. Do I have any recordings today? If I do, let me go ahead and roll out of bed and get these recordings done. And then I guess the routine is hopping on the mic with the person. And then the reward for me is getting to learn about, all these cool new individuals like yourself, and then also getting that information out to my audience. So I can see how you can break down pretty much anything in life into that same framework. So I think that's pretty good. I'm gonna have to go through like, what do I do on a daily basis? And if it's stuff that I don't like, that doesn't align to anything, then why am I even doing it? Like I could see how this could be like a whole audit, like a whole life audit, where I'm looking at daily, then I'm looking at weekly, then I'm looking at monthly. And so anyway, so if anybody out there has a habit that you are interested in changing or improving, you can use this framework for literally anything. So thank you so much for sharing that with us today, Anthony. So if people were interested in learning more about you, the podcast, anything that you have going on, how could they find you?
They can find me all around on the internet at About That Wallet, at aboutthatwallet.com. I'm on Twitter. I'm on Facebook. I rarely use it, but Instagram definitely. So you can definitely follow me there.
Awesome. Well, I will have all Anthony's links in the show notes. He goes over some really cool stuff on his podcast. Like I was watching one of his lives, I think it was like a week or two ago, where he was talking about Etsy and how to make digital products on Etsy. And so I was like, ooh, I could make a digital product. Like he actually went and showed like going through Canva and making it, pretty and then putting it on Etsy. And people are making money just doing simple things like that. So I appreciate Anthony and his product. His podcast and everything that he has going on, because it's some really good information. So I'll have all of that in the show notes. And thank you so much, Anthony, for coming on the show today.
Thank you so much for having me.
Bye.
Thank you for listening, joining, and being a part of the Money Talk with Tiff podcast this week. You can check Tiff out every Thursday for a new Money Talk podcast. But if you just can't wait until next week, you can listen to previous podcast episodes at moneytalkwitht.com or follow Tiff on all social media platforms at Money Talk with T. Until next time, spend wise by spending less than you make. A word to the money wise is always sufficient.